My biscuits are all melted. Heat wave. Here we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is it. Last one ever. Let's go. All right, so this is, I suspect, going to be the last ever weekly video on Gary's Economics. And what I want to do today is I want to put away the laptop. I want to put away the scripts because if I'm totally honest, as I've gotten more and more busy and more tired, it's gotten harder and harder to do these weekly videos. And I've started to depend more and more on, I never really write like exactly scripts, but it reaches the point where the videos are quite tightly planned before I start. And it's gotten a little bit away in many ways from like what I kind of started the channel for, which is when I first started the channel with my mate Simran from high school. We did the first video and then we did a scripted video and I hated it. And I said, we never do any scripts. We're just going to go understand the concept 100% and then you can just shoot straight from the hip. But as it's gotten bigger and bigger and as it's become more and more politically powerful and important and I've had so many other things going on, I've had to increasingly rely on quite extensively researching and planning the videos. And it feels to me like it's kind of sometimes lost something, even though I'm really proud of the work that we've done. And since today is going to be the last ever, probably, weekly video on the channel, I thought I'd do something for me, which is leave all the fucking economics to the side and just look down the lens, which is something I hated doing for years and still kind of hate doing in a way. And just tell the story of the channel from the start. I'm going to pick it up from basically where the book left off. The book left me at the back in 2014, quitting banking, and talk about my sort of journey in trying to do something about the economy and economics from a kind of storytelling perspective, and just run us up from 2014 to where we are today and how we got here. All right, so those of you who've read my book will know I quit banking in 2014. And when I wrote the book, I wanted to kind of do this. The first thing my sister said, my sister works in creative writing. The first thing my sister said when I told her I was going to write the book is, you have to make yourself a dickhead in the book. And I kind of thought instinctively that was right. I thought if the book had to be good, I had to like play up these kind of dickheadish elements of my own character, which are there, I'm not going to lie. And I wanted to do this thing where I made it in the book kind of like morally ambiguous. Like, is he really quitting because he wants to do something about the economy? Or is he just trying to quit because he wants to get his money? But the truth is, I quit in August 2014. I moved back from Tokyo back to London. And I did start, like from day one, I was immediately trying to understand how do you actually do something about rapidly growing inequality and rapidly falling living standards? And I didn't really know what I was doing. And the first thing I did when I come home was I left my bike in Japan. I borrowed a bike. Well, I asked my brother if he'd give me his old bike, crashed it immediately, knocked both my front teeth out, woke up in intensive care with both my parents there. All my family was there, which was nice. I was missing about 2.5 teeth, which was less nice. Spent 18 months with no front teeth. And I spent this strange period, 2014, 2015, 2016, wandering around London with no front teeth, trying to figure out how the f do you do something about stopping inequality from growing. And I didn't really have no leads. I don't come from like a media family or a political family. So I didn't really know what I was doing. A friend of mine called Assad, a guy who I went to high school with, really nice guy. He'll be happy to be mentioned, he always is. Sent me a video by a group called The Rules, like a US organization called The Rules. And it was actually about, we actually, if you want to stop like poverty from growing, you need to deal with like the rules of the economic system which are leading to growing inequality. And it was the first thing, other than the work by like the French economist Thomas Piketty, it was the first thing that I really saw people trying to do something about, like actually dealing with a systemic problem. So I cold emailed the guy who narrated that video. This would have been back in 2014. A guy called Jason Hickel, really nice guy, who's incredibly handsome guy as well, Jason Hickel. Still got a big presence online now, but I cold emailed him and I told my story. And I think it's worth recognising, like my mental health. Anyone who's read my book speaks quite openly about my mental health. My mental health was not great in 2014, 15. I cold emailed this guy and told him about all the bullshit that was happening to me at Citibank and how I wanted to like stop inequality from growing. And he said, let's meet up. So I met up with him in London. We wandered around the park somewhere. And he said, oh, you should meet this guy, James Meadway, who was at the time chief economist for like a kind of lefty think tank in London called the New Economics Foundation. I've never considered myself a lefty. I still don't, to be honest. But you know, these were the only guys who were talking about inequality. So I went and met James Meadway, who used to study at LSE. James Meadway went on to be Jeremy Corbyn's economic advisor, I think. But in 2014, 2015, I met up with him and I said, do you think I could get a job volunteering at the New Economics Foundation? I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just trying to find a place where people were working on inequality. And there was a bit of like a faff because I said I wanted to work for free, and because they're like a lefty org, they were like, we don't believe in unpaid internships. And I was like, you know, just trying to do something here. Eventually, they let me come and sit next to James Meadway for a few months. And James was great. I still consider him a friend. And we, you know, chatting about bits about economic history that I didn't learn much about university, you know, the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, which he knew a bit more about than me. And I was trying to find people at the New Economics Foundation working on inequality. And there was nobody, unfortunately. They didn't have anybody working on inequality, which was like kind of staggering to me. I kind of thought like, surely the political left will be working on inequality, but they weren't. At least nobody at the New Economics Foundation was. You know, and this I think will go on to become a theme in my interactions with the left. But there were great people there. I found them a little bit middle class. I think I was a little bit, it was complicated for me because I'd just come from working in investment banking, which is incredibly like high pressure, results oriented. And then I was in this kind of weird lefty warehouse space with some nice people, but you know, perhaps it didn't have the kind of aggressive energy that I'd become used to. But more than anyone, I just couldn't find anybody working on inequality. So what I did when I was there was what I wanted to was write up basically like this economic theory that I'd been developing about inequality and how it affects the economy. And I wrote a website, which was originally called wealtheconomics.org. And what I wanted to do was just write really clearly in plain, simple text how inequality affects the economy. And I think sometimes one thing that sort of frustrates me about the media narrative about me is there's this kind of just blind assumption that I'm some fucking idiot, basically. And I think people sometimes forget that I went to LSE and I was one of LSE's top students and I got an incredibly good degree from LSE, studying maths and economics. I went and worked in finance and I saw that the predictions were wrong. And I spent a lot of time trying to understand, like in quite detail really, like what specifically is it that is missing from mainstream economic theory that is causing us to like continually make these incorrect predictions. You know, I'd witnessed a long period of economists and traders continually predicting the economy would improve, but it didn't. And I think sometimes the narrative about me is quite funny in a way because I'll come out and say, I've studied economics and I've worked in economics and the predictions are always wrong. And I've spent a lot of time trying to understand specifically what is missing from the academic understanding, which is causing the predictions to be wrong. And very often the pushback I'll get is, but the academics aren't saying this. And it's the exact thing that I've tried to do is try to understand the exact specific thing that the academics are missing. So obviously a key part of that is that the academics aren't saying it. You know, if there was not something that the academics were not missing, we would not continually have bad economic predictions and bad economic outcomes. So I think one thing that's what I really wanted at the time was just to write this theory down. So I spent a lot of time writing this theory down. It's still, if you look at my website now, which is a lot more professional than that website I made then, it's still in there in a little corner called Theory, and you can go read it. I think Oscar, my channel manager, has patched it up a little bit to make it less obvious that it was written in 2014. But I wrote this website, really clear website, 2014, 2015. Really good. Put my heart into it. And then obviously I realised, like, I told all my friends and family, but like, you know, didn't change the world, obviously. Nobody read my website because nobody knew who I was. It was nice just to have the ideas written down somewhere in case I got hit by a bus. Because I do really think, and really in my heart of hearts, what I'm most interested in is trying to move like understanding of economics into a place where it recognises the way that wealth inequality affects the macroeconomy. And I would love to see more academics like working on this work. But we'll get back to that. Made the website, didn't change anything, obviously. My mate Assad was still trying to get me to go to like lefty events and stuff. I remember there was a group of guys protesting on Parliament Square, and Assad said, the police have it was raining and the police confiscated their umbrellas. And my mate Assad was like, that's a disgrace, isn't it? So he went down to the protest. And I remember it was really funny because there's a activist called Assad Rahman, who is the exact same name as my friend. So he went down to this protest and they were doing their sort of funny human microphone that they do. And then they were like, the next speaker is Assad Rahman. My mate shit himself. It wasn't him. So I was working at this lefty think tank, trying to get involved in looking into lefty politics. Didn't really see anything that I thought was going to make it happen. And I kind of thought, listen, these guys are not going to change the world. No disrespect to the left, but I kind of thought I have to try something different. And I immediately, the two avenues I had in mind were academia or media. And this is what I was thinking back in 2015 when I still didn't have no fucking teeth. And if I'm honest, in my heart of hearts, I always thought academia wouldn't really work because I'd done an undergrad at LSE. I didn't feel, and if I'm honest, I still don't feel that at the moment academic economics is a space which really encourages independent thought and pushing the model forward. And even though I'd not been in academia for, I guess, 7 years at that point, when I was working in finance, you do get all of the top graduates from all of the top unis coming and, interning with you. And with the exception of Titsi from my book, who I thought was dead smart, I didn't really see these guys really trying to understand things. I had a pretty negative view of academia. But I didn't really want to do the media route because I didn't want to try and become famous Gary Stevenson. I really need to emphasize my mental health was not great at this point in time and I didn't want to go and become incredibly famous. So, and I also thought, if you're gonna do what I do now, which is go out on TV and say, the economists are all wrong, you probably should do them the justice of going back into academia and making sure that they are actually as bad as you think they are. And also, at the time, we had this little mini resurgence of a few really good French economists, Thomas Piketty, Gabriel Zucman, Emmanuel Sayers, who were starting to do quite interesting work in academia. And Gabriel Zucman and Emmanuel Sayers were both at Berkeley, University of California. So I thought, you know what, I'll apply for a PhD at Berkeley. I did that in 2015, 2016. I applied, they rejected me. And then I had a year of just around playing Crusader Kings 2, another perhaps pretty bad mental health period for me, although I learned a fucking lot about medieval history. Great game, Crusader Kings 2, be careful, incredibly addictive. And the next year I decided to be a bit more serious. I applied to a load of universities, got rejected from Berkeley again, eventually went back to Oxford. So, went to Oxford, I didn't do my undergrad at Oxford. And I was at Oxford from 2017 to 2019. And that was really it was really fun in a way. I was one of the older people. I was about to turn 31 when I started. To be honest, between 2013 and 2017, I didn't really work. I was just sort of floating around, doing therapy, trying to be less up. And it was nice to be back there with some kids. It was mainly 22, 23-year-olds on the course who didn't know all about economics, but could do a load of simultaneous equations. Trying to explain to them that inequality matters. Oxford, I've done some videos about this, is a mad place. I remember I went to my first lecture and I sat next to this really smart boy called Will, who had done his undergrad in Greece. And he goes to me, oh, what college are you in? Which is a dead giveaway for Oxford, Cambridge wankers, by the way. What college are you in? And I said, I'm in Keble College. And he goes, oh, I'm in Keble as well. It's great, isn't it? And I was like, is it? I've not even been there, And he was like, I can't believe you've not been there. And he took me and he was like, Keble College looks like a fucking castle, stick into Google. This is our fucking castle. It's a fucking weird place. Everyone has their own assigned castle. And you have to go and have dinner in this fucking Harry Potter hall wearing a fucking cape. And I would go in shorts and a hoodie and a cape. And then they were like, please could you not refrain from wearing shorts? Bunch of wankers basically. But it was a good time. I played a lot of football, spoke a lot of Japanese. I was incredibly, even though my expectations were low of what I would get from the professors, it felt exploitative. It cost me 30 grand to do that, 2-year masters. Pathetically bad. Pathetically bad. Some of the micro professors were good. I should give credit to Paul Klemperer and Meg Myers who tried to do well. But the macroeconomics guys could not give two shits about us or about the economy. You know, I've told this story a few times, but you know, I had one of my early lectures was on interest rates, and obviously that's why I was a very successful interest rate trader. I went to the presser afterwards, you know, can we talk about why we've been so wrong about interest rates for so long? You know, I'd made millions of pounds betting that rates would stay zero, but people had consistently said rates will go back up, the economy will renormalize. And he just said to me, no, we always knew rates would stay zero, which is like categorically wrong. And I was just like, I couldn't believe like somebody teaching interest rates at Oxford would not be aware that we had been mispredicting interest rates for 9 years. Pathetically bad. And I went home and showed him the data, and he was just like, oh yeah, you're right, we have been wrong for 9 years. You know, didn't even want to fucking talk about it. Like, I just, and of course I want to be clear, you know, there are people in academia who are good. You know, I've sung the praise of Gabriel Zucman for a long time, Piketty and Sayers who work with him, Harjun Chang we've had on the channel, amazing economist. The guy who eventually became my supervisor, Linus Mattauch, who I think is not an economist because it's so hard to find economists who are actually good. There are good people in the discipline. We need more good people in the discipline. But that course, every single person who had like 3 independent brain cells left economics after that course. And all of the people who did best were the people who spent 100 hours a week memorizing algebra in windowless cages in the library. And I think it just showed me like, what the f have we done to this discipline? Horrible, horrible, torturous discipline. I remember we went when we came towards the exams, one of the senior professors came in and he said, we were supposed to have like a therapist, like a psychologist, like a counselor come in and talk to you today about like the stress of the exams. But we know you're all fine, so we cancelled it. And you know, I was like the second oldest person on a course of about 77. And I was quite vocally critical of the course. So a lot of the younger students who were having problems with their mental health would come and speak to me about it. And there were people who were having really, really serious mental health problems. It's an absolute hothouse environment, incredibly hostile. And it's so difficult for them to examine and fail people because everyone is like #1 in their undergrad. So they almost create this hothouse environment to try and see who they can force to have a mental breakdown. And most of the people who failed that course failed because of some form of mental breakdown. And just, I think it really taught me something about like the British like upper classes and how fucking horrible they often are, which you'll have seen a lot of in the last couple of weeks. But moving aside from Oxford, and if they've got any problems with it, then don't make your course less fucking shit, basically, and give me my 30 grand back, because it's a disgrace what you've done to that. And I just hope other universities are better, because that Oxford course was horrifically bad. Anyway, it made it very clear to me that my future wasn't in academia. And I mean, I wrote my thesis, it's on my website, you can have a look at it. I would love to do more academic work, but I just couldn't trust these idiots to recognise good work. You know, and I think when I talk like this about economists, it's probably part of the reason why Reddit hates me so much. But it's died a death. Anyway, we'll talk more about that on another video if I ever come back. I decided I need to give it a go in media. And the girl I was dating at the time at Oxford said, oh, Michael Walker is coming in to give a talk. So Michael Walker, for those of you who don't know, Oxford graduate, but is also one of the presenters of Novara Media, which is one of the biggest left-wing YouTube channels here in the UK. And I was interested in talking about inequality on the media and social media. So I went to his talk, got chatting to him later. This would have been towards the back end, towards like middle 2019, when I'm finishing the course. And I basically told him about my backstory. And I was like, gives a job. So like Michael Walker, I went back and we were speaking to Gary McQuiggan, who works in video, and we had a long back and forth. And anyway, they sat on their hands for too long and didn't give me a job. And then, nothing against them, by the way. Love Novara, love the guy. Love Gary and Michael, to be fair, but whatever. They should have moved quicker. And then we had this snap election in the back end of 2019. I had some stuff. I finished my course in 2019. I was trying to get into media. I had some personal life stuff I had to deal with towards the back of 2019. Snap election, Novara were busy. They didn't give me a job. COVID happened at the beginning of 2020. And it was incredibly clear to me, incredibly quickly, that this was going to massively, massively, massively increase inequality and was going to massively, massively decrease living standards. Nobody was talking about it. We was obviously all locked at home. It was a mental time. It was weird for everyone. But I was just like, now's your fucking time, basically. Write your piece. And a big thing I did, I started trading again. I opened like a spread betting account, put a massive bet on the gold price, because I could see really clearly asset prices were going to go through the roof, inequality was going to go through the roof. I think it's quite funny, I started trading again at the same time I started writing, and I wrote this article explaining what would happen: cost of living crisis, inflation crisis, austerity, house price rises, stock price rises, gold price rise. And I just sent it to like the local Momentum group. Like I said, I'm not really a lefty, but my mate Assad was a massive lefty and he was really involved in it. And somebody got in touch with me, I think it might have been one of Jeremy Corbyn's sons, and said, oh, what you should do is email this guy, Laurie McFarlane at Open Democracy. So I emailed this guy, Open Democracy, sent them this article, he loved it, great editor, great guy, Scottish lad. That went up, it was massive, and then suddenly everybody wanted me to write for them. And weird time, obviously, COVID locked at home. I wrote for The Guardian, I wrote for, I don't even know, I wrote for The Express, Washington Post, who was I writing for? I don't even know. I wrote for everyone in 2020. And Labour were talking to me, I can probably say it now because it was years ago. Even Labour started talking to me, and this is why the Wealth Tax Commission kind of got done, because I was saying there's going to be a massive increase in inequality, maybe we should do something about it. And I weirdly started to become like quite influential in these like kind of lefty wanker spaces. Love these guys, I shouldn't have said that, take that back, edit that out. And I was being really successful. It was like, it was writing for everyone, it was getting out there, but I really started to feel like we weren't hitting the fucking public. Like, you know, these lefty spaces and these media spaces and these Guardian spaces, these broadsheet spaces, they don't really penetrate like regular people's lives. And I was really worried about what was going to happen. I was saying bad things were going to happen, and my friends were saying, is that really going to happen? And I was like, yeah, it is going to happen. And they were panicking and they were going online. And then, back then, if you went online to find out about the economy, you'd end up in these ridiculous conspiracy spaces, anti-Semitic spaces, often far-right spaces. And I could see, like, that's the gap there is social media. So I was on my like high school WhatsApp group, and I was trying to convince these lefty guys to make videos, you know, and they weren't interested. And I was just like bitching about them to my high school mates. And then one of my mates, Simran, who's a dentist, said, oh, you know, I've got some camera equipment. Why don't you just come and like shoot in my like back room, you know, we'll put it up on YouTube. And I was like, yeah, we did that. We did the first ever video on this channel, which maybe we'll link to. Went up in June 2020. And I just took off all the writing, all the broadsheets and that, and I was like, let's just focus on video, because I just thought that was where the gap was. And me and Simran did videos for a couple of years, wandering around the streets, and we weren't too serious about it. And then the beginning of 2022, I had a bad breakup back in 21. At the beginning of 2022, I was like, okay, let's get serious. I went to Colombia for 7 weeks, and then I come back like, let's get serious. We started doing weekly videos. The videos started to get good. And it reached a point where I was like, the videos are sick now. How can we bring people to it? And then the guy who is now my literary agent called me up and said, love your articles, you thought about writing a book? And I was sitting right here, I was eating my porridge. And I remember saying to him, that sounds like a lot of work, mate. But he wanted me to write like a kind of economics-y book, and I was like, that sounds shit. I want to write like an exciting book about the trading floor, make it like a film, make it like Goodfellas. And he was like, yeah, that sounds great. But anyway, I didn't. I thought he was just a weirdo. Hung up on him. But I just stayed in my mind, like if I could write a good book, maybe, because now we've got like 30, 40, 50 videos up, we can blow the channel up, we can change the game. And I couldn't get it out of my head, this idea, like maybe we can write a book, maybe we can write a book. It might have been 2021 he called me anyway. And then 2022, I was like, you know what, I'm gonna have a crack at it. And I was trying to write it, and I'd never really written before, and I thought I couldn't do it, so I sort of gave up. And then another lady called me in 2022, an editor at a small company called Profile. Her name was Louisa Dunnigan. She was like, you should write a book. And by then I'd given up on it, and I said, look, I've been trying, but I'm not really a writer. She said, come in, let's talk about the problems you're having. So I went in and we spoke about like, some of the structural problems, and she convinced me to send her a little bit of what I'd written, which is basically now the whole LSE section of the book. And she called me up, I was like, can you come in? I went in, and they sent down these like 5 like lovely looking ladies in suits to sort of pitch to me like, we want to give you a deal, basically. And I was like, I never really considered myself to be, I'd never any history in writing. And then it was only then that I went back and read it, and I thought, oh, it's pretty good actually. So I called Chris again, the guy who's now my agent. I was like, I got offered a deal. We chatted a little bit about it. And And then I thought, yeah, let's have a go at this. And I spoke to my sister, who worked in writing, and we wrote, well, I wrote the first, like, what is now part 1 of the book, 20,000 words. And I sent it to Chris, my agent, and then I was like, I wanted to cycle with my friend Annie to Cromer in North Norfolk. And he was like, well, you can go now because you're not going to hear back for a week. And then I was cycling in Suffolk somewhere. Chris calls me, he's like, oh, we've got like massive preempt from Penguin. Preempt is like some weird thing that they do in publishing where they're like, take it or leave it, let us know by the end of the day. And they want to get you off the table. They're trying to like press you into making a deal. And I remember thinking like, I'm not going to sell my life story to some dickhead on I've not even looked at his face before. Chris thought that was hilarious. We got another preempt and I said no to everyone. So I had to come back and then everybody went mental and we were getting all these like massive offers. And once I realised I had these massive offers, then I was like, what an opportunity. Because I knew that they would have to advertise the shit out of it. And by then I was quite confident I could write a good book. And that is what started probably, that would have been 2022. The last 4 years of my life, which have been a period of basically intense obsession. And it's funny because the book is supposed to be about like, there's this quote, ambition is a great man's madness. It's about how it's unhealthy to be like obsessed and addicted. But I was obsessed and addicted while writing the book. And I was convinced it was going to be massive. I was convinced it was amazing. Then when it finally came out, 2024, it was #1 for 2 weeks, was it? And I remember I was disappointed. I remember thinking like, it deserves more. And I spent that time before that, like professionalising the channel. I brought Jackie in, and Oscar is now channel manager. I had to get some funding for the channel. Then we had the big press campaign in 2024. Like it was massive, everything blew up. We had the election in 2024 and we were not in any position to influence the election. And I was pissed. The 2024 election was early. I'll link to a video that I did before the 2024 election. And I was so pissed at how little influence we had. And a thing happened, which I should mention, like when Liz Truss came in, which was, I don't know, like a year earlier, say, or 2 years earlier. I remember when Liz Truss came in, and she cut all the taxes on the super rich and that. And because I'm looking at markets, I could see before most people like on the left that she was going to be forced to resign. But I could also see that it was going to cause a massive collapse in living standards. And I remember I went up to Labour conference because I was trying to influence the political left and I was trying to influence Labour. And it was in September. It was these two things happened exactly the same time. And I remember telling all these like lefties, this is going to be disaster for living standards. And she's going to have to resign. And they were all like, nah, she's never going to have to resign. I was like, no, it's so serious, she's going to have to resign. And then they were like, oh, that's going to be great. That's going to be great. Like the Conservatives will collapse and it's going to be great for Labour. And I was head in my hands, and I'll link, because I think it's one of the best videos you've ever done. The video I did about Liz Truss. Because, you know, I don't like this fucking sideways fire on the left stuff. But when Liz Truss did what she did, and massively cut taxes on the rich, and massively hit living standards for the regular British family, that was my fault in my eyes. That was my fault in my eyes. Because my job is to have the British public understanding that you cannot allow your politicians to do that. If a politician comes in thinking they can do that, that's my failing. And I was really upset that the left didn't feel to me like they felt as personally as I did the hits on living standards. So when Keir Starmer came in, look, I've got to be honest, I don't do this for fun, right? I want when a new Prime Minister comes in, I want my voice to be in that conversation. That's why I do this. And then when Keir Starmer came in, that election was called a little bit early, you might not remember. I was expecting it to come in like November. I was planning and trying. I wanted to be able to influence that election. And it came in June. And I couldn't. I couldn't influence Starmer. You know, we kind of soft endorsed the Greens, who were doing wealth taxes. We couldn't influence the election. We couldn't influence the policy. And I was pissed off, to be honest. I was pissed off about it. And I didn't want that to happen again. So I was like, 2025, we have to go again. We have to go harder. We have to go bigger. We have to have my face on the cover of the book. We have to make it the Gary Stevenson show. Because I'm not having another election where I can't influence it. And then 2025, so anyone who doesn't know, like, was in the country, like, the book was #1 for, I think, 11 weeks. It was the #1 book on the whole of Spotify. It was that, like, there were only 2 non-fiction books in the top 10, which was me at #1 and Stephen Fry. Like, last year was mental. There was like billboards everywhere with my face on it. And like, if I'm totally honest, it was easily the best season we've ever done of Gary's Economics, the first half of 2025. And it was crazy. It was crazy hard. And I was insane. And I was doing this media campaign for 3 months. I remember, like, in one space of like a week and a half, I did Piers Morgan, Diary of a CEO, and Question Time. We were getting like 20,000 new followers every day on every platform. It was just crazy. It was crazy. It was crazy. But then it just kept going. Like, normally with a book campaign, they expect it to be like 2 weeks. But because the book stayed #1, it would just keep going and going and going. And then I was being asked to go on stage at Glastonbury, and it was just like, you know, I remember I once went out for lunch with Carol Vorderman and Gary Lineker, and it was just like nonsense stuff that was going on. But the whole time, I was just like, what's the argument? How can we crystallize this? How can we make the public, the only thing they care about is inequality? You know, how can we just like land this? How can we dodge all the bullets coming at us? And yeah, it was funny in a way. You know, you read my book and you read about I've experienced burnout and I've got this history of obsession and overwork. And I was like, I knew I was doing it. I knew I was obsessed and I knew I was working too hard. And it just felt like we could keep going and going, but I knew, like, I'll go insane, basically. I'll go insane. You know, and I had to tell Penguin. And Penguin, my PR at Penguin has been amazing throughout, and they were always like, whenever you want to stop, you tell us. And I was like, no, more. And after about 3-4 months, I was like, I have to stop for like my own mental health, basically. So I stopped April, May, and I did this little tour, and I went to Japan, and I went to Italy and Portugal and Sweden and Norway, and I was doing events, I was doing media in every country, and I was speaking, doing interviews in Japanese and doing fucking interviews in Italian and all this it was stupid what I was doing, to be honest. But I come back in June. When did we start the season last year? We did another one. I came back and I went straight back into a season again, like a fucking maniac. Because I just felt like we're so close. You know, I knew Starmer was going to fail. I knew Starmer was going to go. I knew there was going to be a new leader. I knew that we had a chance to influence that new leader. And I was just like, we can't stop now. We can't stop now. We have to keep going. But I was aware, because I've had burnout before, that I was pushing deeper and deeper and deeper into burnout. And we were doing a video every week. And the whole time, my life's changed and I can't walk down the street without getting recognised 25 times, which is fine, but I don't mind people coming up and saying hi to me. But like, you know, and then in Financial Times is writing a 5,000-word hit piece on me, which is just a bunch of fucking wankers calling me a wanker, which is fine. That's increasingly my life nowadays. But I was starting to burn out, and I knew, like, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep doing these videos. I think I started to feel that my creative energies were like depleting, and I started to feel that the quality of the videos were falling. I started to feel like I wasn't able to be on top of it as much as I was. So, you know, me and Chris, my agent, we started to think about, you know, what other things can we do? Because I don't think I can keep doing these weekly videos forever, basically. So that's when we decided, all right, we'll start talking about documentary. We spoke with Channel 4, we spoke with BBC, and you know, we went and met Louis Theroux. He pitched for it. And we went with Louis Theroux's company. We made a documentary. I met with Trevor Doxey, who's now the director. And I remember saying to them, like, I'm knackered and I'm going to book like 3 weeks holiday before we start. And the first thing they did was they cancelled my holiday. So I remember coming back, and then like from the first thing I walked in and I'd already met the director and the producer, like, how are you? And I was like, well, I'm fucking pissed off you cancelled my holidays. I was knackered. So I was knackered from the beginning of production. And then obviously going into TV is very different to doing YouTube. Like here in the YouTube, like, guys might not realise, but like we've got one videographer, we've got some guys who do clipping, one guy does like managing it. All of the content here is me. There's no researcher, there's no scripter. All of the content and every single Gary's Economics video is me every week, and I write that video every week. I I mean, on the one hand, I was looking for more collaborative work, but like it was weird to be in a space where you go into TV, there's a lot of cooks spoiling that broth, you know, like director was great, but he was working incredibly hard. There's pressure from the production company, there's pressure from Channel 4, there's pressure from legal. They're asking me to interview all these dickheads who hate me. You know, another thing that happened last year was like all of the worst people on the internet started to become like absolutely obsessed with me, which is like just a weird feeling. People might think that I'm like, I don't really like being famous. I don't like the intense personal pressure on me. And it's just, I don't like being spoken about. That's why I started wearing this evil eye bracelet. It's working overtime recently. But yeah, and I was knackered from the start, and I was, you know, I did enjoy it. They taught me like this new interview style, you know, let people talk, give them rope to hang themselves with. But it was, you know, maybe you see 5 minutes of me on the screen. We'll put a link in the description for the documentary, people who haven't seen it. Unfortunately, it's geo-blocked. So unless you can get around that, you can only watch it if you're in the UK. But it was fucking hard work, and I was knackered from the beginning. And I was knackered throughout, and I was just stretching it through. And then I remember I booked, at the end of it, I had this Australia-New Zealand tour booked. So I was gonna go Australia, New Zealand, and Australia, New Zealand, it was loads and loads and loads and loads of press. It was great. It's amazing to see like how popular, like how loved I am on the other side of the world. But again, incredibly busy. We did 5 dates in 7 days, flights, big place, Australia, New Zealand. Loads and loads of press, loads and loads of like abuse. Well, actually, not as bad as what I get here. They were great, Aussies, Kiwis, we love you. And I had like had 2 weeks. I'd never been to New Zealand before. I had 2 weeks booked at the end to just like have a holiday in New Zealand. And then they cancelled my holiday again, these wankers. I'm not gonna say who it was. But like, this is like, and they cancelled my holiday and they said, come back. And then they made me do like the studio shoot. So if you watch the documentary, there's like me talking to camera. There's only a few shots of me talking to camera, and that was all done in 1 day. And I came back, flew back from New Zealand, 13 hours ahead, come back early for my holiday. Director comes around, makes me work a whole day as soon as I get back, tells me, studio day tomorrow, you've got to wear a suit or something. And then I turned up like the most pissed off man in the world, the most pissed off jet lagged man in the world, knackered. Had to do a full studio day, unscripted, me to camera. 10-hour shoot, which in my body clock was from like 10 PM to 7 AM or something. Knackered. And then, but I'd made this documentary and I knew we were going to get a new Prime Minister, and I wanted to land it, and I wanted to try to be able to influence a new Prime Minister. So I was like, fine, we'll come back, we'll do the studio date, we'll get everything ready, we'll do the fucking voiceover. Get the channel up and running, because I want the channel to be running for when documentary comes out. And they said documentary's going to come out in April. So I was starting it in April. I was fucking knackered, but I was like, whatever. We'll have the YouTube running. We'll do a massive press campaign. And then the documentary will come out. Documentary got pushed back to July. And in that meantime, Keir Starmer like gets hammered, and we know he's gonna move. And then suddenly all these Labour MPs want to talk to me. So then I'm making the videos. I'm lobbying Labour. And I'm, you know, trying to interview Zuckman. I'm trying to manipulate the rest of his politics. Being basically a full-time lobbyist. I've also started trying to like support other influencers behind the scenes. And the documentary keeps getting pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. And then eventually it's going to come out in July. And they're like, you're going to have to do like a full press campaign in July. And I knew I was knackered. And I remember going onto Piers Morgan with my Channel 4 PR. She said, how do you feel about it? And I was like, I feel like I'm going into the lion's den with 2 fucking broken legs. You know, because I knew they were just going to come for me. And, you know, the media has come for me a lot. And it's one thing, I went on Piers Morgan last year. If I can be honest, I think I kind of fucking danced around them, to be honest. And I just went back in as like the world's knackeredest man. I remember when I did BBC News night, they're like, do you want to do makeup? And I said, to be honest, I want to look as fucking knackered as I am. I don't want to be pretending to not be knackered. And I went out and did the press campaign, really, really, really fucking knackered. We landed it. We've got a lot of use. But it's kind of been, today I'm shooting this on 14th of July. And I've been counting down the days. I've known that this was going to be my last day shooting YouTube. And I've been counting down the days to it for ages, basically. And basically, the long story short is, I'm knackered. And I've given everything I can give to this. and I've not got any more basically. And it's, I don't think I can do the weekly videos every week. I don't think I can do it. And every day you're thinking, you know, for years I thought I'll never run out of content, because this is my baby, this is what I've spent years and years and years thinking about and talking about. And the truth is, to be honest, I think there is still so much more we can talk about. But I'm somebody who's experienced burnout before, and I've already gone further than I should have done, really, in my opinion, from a health perspective. And I have to stop. I have to stop. Yeah, like it will destroy me, I think, if I keep doing it. So I have to stop. And I think probably I will stop weekly videos forever, if I'm honest. I don't. You know, obviously, I'm not going to make no promises on that. You know, if I do, you know, I'm going to take a long rest, and I'm going to go to Japan, obviously, like I do. And if I do feel like the energy comes back, and if I feel like there's another like real moment where we can really have political impact, and another 2 or 3 months of weekly videos is going to get us there, then I'm not saying I'll never do it again. But it's reached a point where, to be honest, I dread doing them. I don't have anything left, and you feel like you're dragging your heart out and putting it on a plate and cutting it up. And I don't want to do that again. But I'm not stopping. I would never do that to you guys. I'm going to be, I think I'll probably stop the YouTube for maybe 9 months. But I've got other irons in the fire. I think what I need to do, I need to find another format which is less the fucking Gary Stevenson show. I'm sick of the sound of my own voice, really. I don't like looking down on camera, and I don't like it being me. So, you know, I'm looking into a podcast format and podcast partners, and there's, you know, someone I'm really excited to work with, and I'm hoping that really works out, and then I'm hoping I can build a space where I'm a bit more supported, and it's not just me. And I'm thinking I will bring the YouTube videos back, but maybe bring them down to monthly. But the truth is, for the last 2.5 years, 4.5 years really, I've worked incredibly hard. And it's my turn is over, in my opinion. I'm not going to stop, but I need you guys to pick up the baton, basically. I need you guys to run with it. And I was talking to Jack yesterday about this. I think it's obvious. I think it's very, very obvious in the last couple of years, even the last few weeks. The very, very richest people in the world are going to fight this. They're going to fight, and they're going to fight, and they're going to fight. And the way that we win, in my opinion, is to just have a broad public, where a big chunk of the public, doesn't have to be everybody, 40%, 50%, 60%, not just here in the UK, but across the world, understand that the reason living standards are falling is because of growing inequality of wealth. And everything that I've done in the last 15 years of my life has been in pursuit of that aim, really. And you know what? I could go back to university, and I could do this and that. But ultimately, I don't think we win this without a broadly educated public that understands that simple concept. But I think if we get that, then we will win. And I've worked incredibly hard to make all these videos that I like to think help educate you on that. I think the Squeeze Out is a great one. We've got the series that educates. But really, like, go through, pick the videos that you help work. You know, some of the interviews are great. I think Krishna Gurumurthy's first video was great. Novara's first interview was very good. Take what interviews that you like of mine, use them to share. But I think we have to accept, and I have to accept, something that I struggle to accept. I'm not going to win this myself. This is not Gary Stevenson Saves the World. I'm a part of this, and you are all a part of this. And this is something that we have to build ourselves out of together. And I cannot be the only educator on this. You know, and this is why I've worked so hard to bring Gabriel Zucman into the debate. It's why I did my video last year encouraging other creators to speak. It's why I've worked so hard to support people like JimmyTheGiant and LouisaMunchTheory and BarrysEconomics. And there's so many other great channels, Unlearning Economics, you know what I mean? I can't remember them all. Lots of great people. Forest Jar on Instagram. I love Forest Jar's videos, but we all need to be a part of this. This is not you sit at home and you watch my videos and you watch fucking Louisa's videos and Jimmy's videos and Barry's videos and you share them. Educate yourselves. Educate yourselves using my videos, using whatever resources help you. Share those resources. Educate others. If the broad public understand this, that living standards will get worse unless inequality gets better. Say it now, and it will be clearly, they will see that will be proved true year after year after year, and government after government after government. And I think we need to accept it's not going to be a short-term battle. And listen, I'm stopping the videos, but I will still be doing everything I can to lobby Burnham and other politicians in other countries when I feel I can make a difference. But there's only so much I can give, and I need to rest. So we need you guys to pick up the baton. And I know when I say that, people are going to message me, what can I do, what can I do, what can I do, what can I do? It can't be like that. It can't be like that. It can't be everybody in the world asks Gary Stevenson, what do I do? You need to think yourselves, and you need to create yourselves, and you need to build yourselves. And you don't need to necessarily make a YouTube channel, but you need to be building connections in your community, building understanding in your own brain. If you understand it yourself, you'll be able to educate it. And just accept and recognize it's going to be a long battle. And to be honest, like, part of the reason why I've worked myself into burnout and into tiredness is because I want you guys to see that I've done it. Because I want you guys to see that I care, basically. And I want it to inspire you to work as well. And look, I'm going to work incredibly hard to get Burnham to do it. If I'm totally honest, I don't think he's going to do it. And if he doesn't, he'll lose, and it'll be Farage, and Farage will lose. And when Burnham's gone, and when Farage is gone, I will still be here, and you will still be here. And the working class people of this country, and of Europe, and of North America, and of the world will all still be here. If we can get the public to understand, we'll fix this. And that's it, basically. Make stuff. I've only got one thing written on this piece of paper. And it says here, we will win in the end. If we didn't win yet, it isn't the end. All right, that's it. Tax wealth not work. Send it to your mum. Good luck.